Hi guys, and welcome back to class. Today we are going to start off with choosing a symbol for love. And you're going to answer this question inside of the discussion board that's online in Schoology. You're going to fill in the blank. Love is like a blank, and you're going to pick a symbol because and finish the sentence off. So for example, here I put love is like a battlefield. And the reason why I put that is because just like in war, there's many casualties to gunfire and things of that nature, people suffering heartache and pain, just like at a battlefield. And that's very similar and true to love. Love is not always easy. It's not always roses. Sometimes there's battles, fights that you may have, just like on a war field. You may fight with the person that you're in love with or have an argument with someone who you're in love with. So when we look at this, we picked a symbol. My symbol was battlefield. This was my symbol. Now, symbolism is a form of figurative language. In this lesson, we are going to analyze how figurative language illuminates or shows us the power of relationships and how they define love. In the discussion board, I want you guys to look at some of your other classmates' symbols. Do you agree with their symbols and what they wrote for love is like and what they filled in the blank? And why do you agree with them or not? So now moving on for this lesson, our focusing question task says, what defines the experience of love? And our content framing question for lesson 8 is in our distill stage, and it says, what are the central ideas about the experience of love in Act 1 and in Act 2? So we've talked about central ideas before. In our previous book, we had a few central ideas. We talked about comradeship inside of All Quiet on the Western Front. We talked about fearlessness, hopelessness, helplessness, feeling of isolation. All of those are central ideas. We said that war was a central idea of All Quiet on the Western Front. So thinking in that regards, what could possibly be a central idea that we've looked at so far? Keep that question to yourself for now. We'll get to it throughout the lesson, but start thinking about it now. Our craft question in our execute stage says, how do I write an evidence-based claim? And in our experiment stage, how does focusing on the purpose of discussion work? So now moving on. We're going to look at some figurative language, and I want you to ask yourself, how does it convey the relationship between Helena and Demetrius? The word convey just means show. So how does it show the relationship between Helena and Demetrius? So I want you to jot down a few things that you noticed and wondered so far about Helena and Demetrius. What have you noticed about their characters? Are they demanding? Are they commanding? Are they kind? Are they generous? Are they thoughtful? What type of people? Are they conniving? Are they jealous? What type of people are these characters? And so you're going to answer that question inside of Schoology and the discussion board. And then when you think about answering this question, I want you to consider how these characters may feel about each other. And are these characters satisfied right now in their lives? You can use some of these sentence stems to help you complete the question. So here it says, I noticed that Helena is really in love with blank. I wonder why Helena follows blank when he treats her blank. And I notice that Demetrius is angry and threatens blank. I notice that both characters seem to be blank, but for different reasons. And I notice that neither character is blank. You can use these sentence stems in order to answer this question that I've just said for you. So when you answer the question inside of the discussion board, it's okay to take these sentence stems and fill in the blanks in order to answer the question properly. So now look at figurative language. We're going to look at lines 202 through 205. And I want you to annotate for where you find a metaphor of the word magnet. Explain how and why Helena compares Demetrius to a magnet. So in order for you to do that, you first need to know what a magnet is. And then once you find out what a magnet is, how does that relate to the relationship between Helena and Demetrius? Then you're going to answer the question, and it's going to be on lines 210 through 217, and annotate for the evidence of a metaphor about dogs. Explain how and why Helena compares herself to a dog. Choose either metaphor for either the magnet or the dog, and write 2 or 3 sentences that explain what the comparisons reveal about Helena and her conception of love. How does Demetrius respond to Helena's descriptions of their roles? Now we're going to look at these sets of words. We've got pairs of opposites. So Helena and Demetrius, they're opposites. A lover and be loved is opposite. Female and male is opposite. And being powerful or powerless is also an opposite. I want you to take the name Helena and pick one of these that goes with her. So for example, we know that she's a female, so that word would go with Helena. So you're going to group these words up underneath the character traits. So female would go under Helena, male would go under Demetrius. Is lover going to go under Helena or Demetrius, or is it going to be the other way around? And you're going to write those pairs or those groupings inside of Schoology and the discussion board. So now after you've grouped these together properly, what do your groupings reveal about this portion of the play and how it represents love for the different characters? Now moving on, we're going to look at social norms. So when we discussed rules and expectations for individuals in a certain place or time, we can refer to these rules and expectations as social norms. Explain these social norms, meaning that these social norms can vary for different groups of people. So for example, the norms and rules and expectations for children are very different from adults. So if an adult acts like a child, then that would be going against a social norm, because an adult is supposed to be very mature and responsible. So it's a social norm for an adult to be sensible, responsible, and having those qualities that show that they are doing what it is that's necessary to be a viable citizen in the world. For example, it may be a social norm for boys to play basketball and for women not to necessarily enjoy sports. That might be a social norm. It doesn't mean that women can't like sports or that women don't play basketball. That's definitely not what it is. But as our social environment and what we've been raised in, we've been taught that certain people do certain things. So like, for example, men are supposed to go out and work and get the money and bring home the money and take care of their wife and their children. And the woman is supposed to stay at home and cook and clean and take care of the kids. That would be considered a social norm. But again, that doesn't mean that that social norm is correct. So let's think about social norms. What gender norms, if any, do you think exist for males and females in grade 8 or in the 8th grade? So like, what do we expect of an 8th grade boy? And what do we expect as a world of an 8th grade girl? Then answer the question, how does Helena's remark that women should be wooed and were not made to woo enhance your understanding of the gender norms revealed in this portion of the play? So in other words, here we're saying that she says women should be wooed. If you don't remember what that word means, refer back to your vocabulary journal or you can look it up. And that they were not made to woo. How does that connect to a social norm of today's society? Now let's look at some characters. Demetrius and Helena enter the scene, and Oberion was still there, and he has been listening to them. I want you to read lines 252 through 276 and find the word disdainful. And that word means showing a lack of respect. So if someone is disdainful, they're being very disrespectful to you. They're not showing you any type of respect. What does Oberion decide to do after hearing Helena and Demetrius' conversation? Now let's look at this quote. Lysander says in Act 1, Scene 1, line 136, that the course of true love never did run smooth. And then Helena says, things base and vile, holding not quantity, love can transpose to form and dignity. Love looks not with the eyes but with the mind, and therefore is winged Cupid painted blind. This is Act 1, Scene 1, lines 238 through 41. How can you focus on the purpose of this discussion using central ideas? What's the central idea that's taking place here? Now, a central idea is illustrating how the idea applies to a completely different set of circumstances and is still true. It's taking the idea in a new direction, such as showing a different way that love does not run smooth or that it was blind, and complicating the idea by showing how a new example reveals a deeper meaning. Then looking at that same two quotes, how does Helena's position and her conception of love in Act 2, Scene 1 develop that central idea? Write a paragraph explaining how Helena's perception of love develops a central idea and use effective evidence from the text. Think about this. How does Helena convey or illustrate the central idea of loneliness? Now we're going to we've done this before, we've done research. You're going to pick one of these topics. Here's the links for where you can find the information to answer that. And you're going to research your question and answer it inside of the discussion board using the information that you get from these articles here. The questions are, what were the gender norms for men and women during Shakespeare's time? What was the status of women during Shakespeare's time? What is the history of love potions? What qualities were associated with fairies during the Renaissance? And what is the history of the character Robin Goodfellow or Puck? So you're going to use these links here, and if you click on one, it's going to take you to an article where you can answer the question properly. Then you're going to complete handout 8A. Now we're moving on to evidence-based claims. You're going to use the T-chart to gather evidence for each possible answer. After you have collected and reviewed the evidence and decide which possible answer the effective better supports and compose your evidence-based claim. So you're going to compose an evidence-based claim based off of the evidence that you gather by answering these questions. So for example, this one says Oberion should use the flower's magic because. You're going to go inside of the text and find a reason why Oberion should use the flower's magic and cite the line and write the line here. Here, you're going to, this one says Oberion should not use the flower's magic because. You're going to find in the text where it says that he shouldn't use the flower's magic and cite those lines here. So you should have 3 pieces of evidence for why he should and 3 pieces of evidence as to why he shouldn't. And then you're going to state your evidence-based claim here. To end this lesson, our content framing question in our distill stage says, what are the central ideas about the experience of love in Act 1 and Act 2? What is the greatest difference between the way that Helena and Demetrius each understand the experience of love? For tonight's homework, you need to read Act 2, Scene 2, lines 1 through 93. Look up the meaning of the word languish, Act 2, Scene 2, line 35, and write one sentence explaining its meaning in line 35. So in other words, when you see the word languish, what does that line mean? Write it in your own words. You're going to also complete and continue your fluency work, so make sure you're practicing reading and finishing up your research topic. That's going to be it for today. Now, once again, as always, I have office hours every day, Monday through Friday, 11:22 to 12:06. Click the link inside of Schoology if you need any help with any of the assignments. All right, guys, I'll see you soon. Bye.